Union's still pressing on the left. Occasionally coming in with some troops. This is going to get difficult. They've been tearing my cavalry to pieces. You see I've got a regiment that I kind of tried to sneak into the north to take out some of those batteries, but if they make a concerted effort up here, I don't hold much of a chance. Let's see. I brought some Zouvois in. I really love those Zouvois uniforms. They're really awesome. Got some artillery there, trying to pour into their flank. I'm really barely holding things together at this point. Still have several hours left. It's only about 1 o'clock now that I've got to make it. I mean, you see my cavalry trading shots with the Zouvois, but then they're getting shots to their flank. I've got another regiment here. Trying to bring those up. That's cavalry as well. God damn it. Darn it. I can't get over the epic scale of this game. It's just... a game of this caliber is just mind-numbing. Man, those casualties are high above what they were historically. Union's still pressing in the center. I drive them back, then they reform and come at me again. Pretty realistic to what happened historically, although to me it seemed in real life it was more one division would assault, then they'd get driven back, then a new division would assault and be driven back. Whereas it seems, at least in this case, it's the same troops all the time. I pushed them back pretty close to that cornfield. You saw a lot of dead bodies strewn up there. I'm bringing up some troops to try and stabilize things here on the in the center. Those artillery batteries really did wonders in holding back the Union from breaking a gap between my left and center. Batteries saved the army in that situation once, or at least my left flank. I'm starting to edit a little bit more, cutting out a bit more. It's more of the same. The army is really withering away. You can see over time how I just have fewer and fewer men in these regiments that are engaging. This is one of my few big regiments left. One thing I don't like in the game is how the infantry seems to lay down a lot when they're under artillery fire. It's not necessarily unrealistic. It happened a lot to kind of minimize, but sometimes it seems to happen when they're at long-range rifle range too. Moving to the southern end of the battlefield, Burnside's attack is getting underway. I've still got a lot of men in the south. My force is still pretty strong, and I've only taken a total of 1 brigade away from it, so it's still very strong. Hills should be coming up shortly. So Burnside's is attacking up this road here in the south, trying to break through my brigade there. Got some other brigades behind those stone walls with some artillery support. Should be able to hold them. But man, they're fresh Yankee troops, and lots of them, over 9,000 men coming at me right now up that, plus the artillery. The artillery seems to me more difficult to deal with than the infantry. Union infantry seems to break pretty easily, but it's the artillery that really wears away your troops. At least that's my perception of the way things go. Look at that. It's almost Napoleonic in sense. They're just massing line after line of infantry, kind of like infantry infantry. They weren't squares, but they were blocks of infantry used for assaulting positions by Napoleon. Thankfully, if they're going to do this, they're going to leave their flank exposed, much like French's division did in the center, and hopefully I can roll them up and without too many losses drive them back, and then maybe dispatch some forces to strengthen my line in the north. We'll see. This is the last part of the video, by the way. It's going to wrap everything up. Got a lot of pretty good-sized brigades down here. It seems to me that this is the best strength part of the army, at least definitely remaining from today, or from this point on. It's the strongest part of the army. But I don't know how one of my regiments holds. Great. I think they're charging. Yep. At least I thought they were. Yeah, they're charging into my center. If they break that center, they could roll my line up before I get troops in position to roll them up. And in a melee fight, I mean, they've got so many more men. At least that whole line has to charge across the face of that regiment there on the left. To get to the 1st South Carolina, they've got to charge straight across the line of fire from a regiment that's essentially flanking the charge. Some artillery there. Those men need to get into position faster. Union are just moving too quick at this stage in the southern part. They move a little bit slower. We'll expose my unit to a flanking fire from those artillery batteries in that wheat field, though. Oh, wow. I don't know how, but they drove that regiment back. That's good. The last part of this battle really focuses on the southern part of the battlefield, which is accurate. Burnside started his attack on the bridge around 10 o'clock, and then early afternoon started moving troops over the bridge and dealing some damage there. Started pushing on, and then historically AP Hill's division came up, which was at Harper's Ferry tending to the prisoners that were being paroled there. The largest cache of Union prisoners in the entire war were captured at Harper's Ferry on September 15th, just 2 days prior. Over 12,000 men. No other point during the war did the Confederates ever capture that many Union troops in one go. Another one of those reasons the Union Army wasn't as strong as it could have been. 75,000 men. They left one corps in Washington. Another corps was typically stationed at Washington. And then 12,000 men were lost at Harper's Ferry. Which, interestingly enough, just a couple of days before, on the 14th, at the Battle of South Mountain, the Union, if they had attacked aggressively, might have had a chance to hit Jackson's... General Jackson was in charge of the Harper's Ferry engagement, and if the Union had moved more aggressively, they might have been able to relieve the force, but as it was, they didn't. But AP Hill's division stayed behind to parole the prisoners. They didn't actually keep the prisoners, they let them go, under sworn promise that the soldiers wouldn't find their way back into Yankee service again. That's how parole worked, is that you'd get to go free right away instead of being sent to a prisoner of war camp, but you had to promise not to take up arms and fight again. That part of the clause was often violated and ignored. That regiment's fleeing, great. Where is Hill? But yeah, it's another one of those things that people don't talk a whole lot about. The Confederates are very poorly armed and very poorly equipped. So at Antietam, you see a lot of Confederates, especially in Jackson's corps, who were wearing Union uniforms that were captured at Harper's Ferry. They captured thousands of uniforms, thousands of small arms weapons, over 13,000 small arms weapons. I mean, it was a treasure trove of captured equipment. But at times it did lead to some confusion, as many Confederate regiments often were wearing uniforms of Union troops, and that's always a risky thing. I mean, one thing, there is a modification in this game. It's a smoke mod, which gives more realistic levels of smoke. There is the smoke in the game I like. It's very it's there, you see it, but it doesn't hamper your ability to command. If you want a more realistic look, you might want to look at the smoke modification that I can't recall who made it for this game. But there is a smoke mod, and it makes the smoke levels much more realistic. Much thicker, denser, harder to really see what's going on. Let's see here as I charge the Union guns and put some of them out of commission. 3 of the 5 guns of that battery anyway. 6 guns of that battery. 3 of the 6 guns. Union artillery promptly fires canister into one of those, routing the battery and sending it off, but at least that gun won't be firing into my men anytime soon. Fences really slow you up. That regiment's done for. It's charging into 2 rifle lines and into an artillery battery. Come on, boys, hold it together. Get one more of their guns. We're trying to limber up and get out of there. Or is that the Confederate battery they just routed? Not sure. Oh! They're compelled to retreat just before they get there. Literally inches away. That's lame. Oh well, it should help. 3 batteries not firing canister into my men. Goodness. Where is Hill? There's no way I'm holding without Hill's reinforcements. Hill's division was still relatively small, only about 3,000 men. You see there, the casualties continue to mount. Now well above historical levels for the Confederates. One other thing I was talking about before the last video ended is that in this game, your casualties are not always represented solely in terms of killed or wounded, but also men driven from the field. So, for example, I have less than, what is it now? Less than 15,000 men. The army started with just under 40,000 men. I haven't lost, 20,000 casualties. But some of the regiments were routed from the field, so they no longer count either. I don't know if they'd count as missing at the end of the battle or what, but there's a pretty large number of troops which are not dead or wounded, but they are also no longer able-bodied for me to call on. And sometimes when a regiment routes beyond the ability for you to rally it, the men will essentially run off the map. Which isn't terribly realistic because, I mean, no soldier, well, you're typically not going to see a soldier sprinting 6-7 miles to get out of the entire conflict. They might, retreat and then kind of rest and regroup in Sharpsburg and gather their wits there. Kind of like at the Battle of Shiloh, where the Union units, which routed, cowered near Shiloh Landing and were put into a makeshift last defensive line, which, if attacked, probably would have shattered on impact, but they were still there, they were still present. They were just trying to get as far away from the battle as possible, because they were more or less done. Here you got a close-up on 2 regiments firing into the Union, 2 larger Confederate regiments. My casualties are still rapidly increasing. See here, they're kind of moving out to the north a little bit too and kind of flanking me there. General Hill's division has arrived. You'll notice it looks like I've got a lot more regiments, and that's because Hill's division is coming into play. You see off in the distance there were some troops marching in, and he's already got one of his brigades on the firing line. The arrival of Hill has helped me to turn the tide on this part of the battlefield on the Union. As you can see, I'm sweeping them and trying to flank them from this cornfield. Well, empty field. Many of those regiments are routed and running, and other ones are holding up for now, but I've got a good flanking maneuver going on there. Some Union guns out here. But those hordes of regiments are no longer in sight, so a lot of them have been routed back across the stream Definitely things are going very well here to start on the southern end of the field, although casualties are high. We're at the ground level, firing straight into Union troops, front and rear. Can't imagine that regiment will stay there long, and nope, they begin to fall back first. Soon they'll probably be retreating full-fledged. Some Federal canister fire from that battery I was looking at really played havoc on my troops, though, too. Looking at the northern end of the battlefield, Union continues to press there periodically. I've got a couple of large regiments, which I did move from the southern part of the field to try and strengthen my force here. 3 regiments, good sized. Really all I have left on the entire northern section of the battlefield, in addition to that big battery of artillery of mine. Hopefully the Union doesn't bring anything too tough against us. It's already difficult enough to hold as it is. So those casualties continue to mount. I'm now under 10,000 equipped men. Back to the southern field of battle. I really like, wow. Well, that was devastating, that little explosion there with some Union canister ripping into my line. I really like these kind of close-up, low-in shots. I've done a video on my YouTube channel where I looked at what's called headquarters in the saddle, which is a setting in the game you can choose as I'm sweeping these Yankees from the field. But it's a setting in the game you can choose where your commander, for example, Lee, what it does is it zooms you in on your character, and you can't zoom out like this, so that essentially you're glued to your character. And it's a really unique look at the game, because it's you know, it puts you in the role of one general, but it also limits you to their visibility to make it more realistic. And I also think that's one of those things where the smoke mod that someone has made would come in real handy, because it would really give you that atmosphere. I mean, just with the terrain, you feel kind of lost in the battle. I mean, honestly, commanding more than a brigade with headquarters in the saddle is difficult, and even commanding a brigade, it's really hard to get a sense of where you're at, where the enemy's at. You just kind of have to follow the orders you're given and hope that they're accurate. As I'm pushing the Union back here, just hope that they're accurate enough that you don't end up in a tough spot. It really kind of puts you in the mood and the mindset of a real Civil War general, where you've got that limited line of sight, and even a small little hill can totally disconnect you from the feel and look of an engagement. Often when we get these top-down perspectives, it's easy to say move a line here, move them there, move them on end on the flank, but when you're actually there at the ground level, it just puts things into perspective. I mean, being a general is not easy. Might seem obvious, some of the decisions, but the courier system in this game as well is just kind of one of those things where you recognize, you know, if that courier doesn't get to you with those orders to say retreat, you continue holding, you don't know any better, and all of a sudden you're surrounded. Or you get orders to attack, but you don't, and then, you know, the attack fails because the orders never arrive. And that headquarters in the saddle mode of the game just gives you that real feel and look, and certainly something unique to war games that I've run across anyway. Instead of being that top-down, all-knowing general, it puts you more in perspective. I tried to play a scenario as McClellan. It was the 6-hour version of this scenario where you're just the Union and you're McClellan, and honestly it was just too difficult for me. I don't have enough experience with the game, I guess I would say. Wow, they brought in some reserves, or they're reforming. I don't have enough experience with the game, I would say, maybe, but it was certainly difficult to do. I mean, everything at ground level, especially if you set it to having to send couriers for orders and the like. Just makes things a lot more realistic, and a gem of a game, but at the same time one of those things where you love and hate the game at the same time, because you want to be able to zoom out and see it just once. You think, just once, if I can get a better look here, if I can get kind of a better feel here, or do this there, and you just you know, I mean, you could do that, but that would kind of negate the entire purpose of doing what you do with the settings, setting it up like that. So, for what it's worth, it's certainly unique. I wonder if anyone who's actually gone through the Army War College and used this game for training has any comment. If anyone out there is even checking, you know, the boards to see. I wonder if anyone can say what aspects of the game they focus on the most to kind of give you that training. You know, leadership decisions. When you do use it, do they lock you into the headquarters in the saddle mode? Do they give you a more overarching but focus on couriers? How would it be used in training? That's one thing I'd really be interested in seeing. Just getting that perception. As I push Burnside's back here. Holding the cornfield. I believe those silver icons are like bonus objectives. The gold ones are the ones you're supposed to hold on the defensive. The silver ones are, you know, I guess you're doing extra, and you might get some extra points for them. Something about a line of infantry just firing away, though, that's tragic yet beautiful, I would say. So we fire into them. Looking what we're looking at right now, this is kind of what headquarters in the saddle would look like. Easy enough when you're in a big cornfield to still kind of see where things are going, but when you're on a hill, when you're in a valley, when you're in woods, you know, this is not a cornfield. I think it's more of a wheat field, but same rule would apply. And then you see the smoke here being a little bit of a nuisance, but being, you know, nice and pretty to look at. But just imagine what the smoke would be like in that modification where everything's realistic. You get low-hanging smoke, and all of a sudden even a nice high, you know, even a nice position like what we're looking at right now where you kind of have the high ground higher up than the other forces, and you've got a clear line of sight because you're in a field that's pretty well cut down. All of a sudden you can't even see well here, and then imagine when you get into more confined territories in like a wood or a shallow or, you know, on the opposite end of a hill, just how difficult that really would be. One other thing I find interesting is that it doesn't seem like ammo wagons ever really have a risk to run out. Some individual scenarios where the focus of the scenario is that your units are low on ammo, that happens. It doesn't seem to happen in the general engagement, which I'd be interested to know if that's really, you know, Lee had no problem with ammo, or if ammo was a serious concern. Because I know in the Gettysburg campaign, especially for artillery, ammo was a fairly restricting influence on some of the tactics and strategies that were employed. And maybe being able to more accurately mimic what ammo would have been like in this battle would have given a little bit more historical flair. Now, Gettysburg, granted, was a 3-day battle, whereas this is only a 1-day battle, so the ammunition stock is probably less likely to be burned through. But still something that was interesting to think about. Pouring fire into the Union troops as my army melts away, and so too does the Union force, although not at a fast enough rate to justify the trade-off between losses inflicted and losses received. Not all those troops are engaged. Gonna try and get around their flank a little bit, but they do have a brigade in reserve there, which could pose a problem. What is that regiment doing? They're kind of marching across the face of the regiments that are firing. So another thing the game does do well is if you have a regiment behind another regiment and they're trying to fire at the enemy, it will either say shooting over if they have the ability to still hit them, but they'll be less accurate, or that their, you know, a site or a target is blocked, and that obviously prevents your fire from being effective against the enemy because a large percentage of your troops aren't able to shoot without hitting their own men. One thing I think the game could simulate more accurately is fog of war. It happened quite frequently in the war where one or two regiments would lose sight of the lines and fire into their own lines. I think that would have to be a nightmare to code or try and make into a game. But it would be something that would add a lot of detail and a new element, something that no one else does and no one else probably will do. It would certainly be an interesting twist. At this point it seems like Burnside's attack has more or less failed. We still have pretty good reserve down here, and also at the moment have stemmed the tide of the Union advance. Some of these brigades really shrink down too. We're talking brigades down to 100 men in some cases. Getting into the last minutes of the battle, really. It's only about 3 o'clock, but both armies are totally fought out. Confederate army having down close to around 5,000 of the original almost 40,000 men left, and the Union Army can't be doing much better. Well, I guess they could be, but it's been pretty even so far in terms of the fighting. Union are retreating there, holding this cornfield. Some Union troops trading fire with my men on the opposite side of the creek. Another 2 brigades, it looks like, or at least 1 brigade held in reserve by McClellan. Looking back north on the flank, Union look to be moving toward another attack. Got 3 regiments here, 3 good-sized regiments. Been fighting all day. Really the only thing I've got left on my left flank. Casualties are huge. Only a couple of thousand men left effective. This battle, more than anything, was an annihilation battle. You know, the real Battle of Antietam was difficult. Lee lost about a quarter of his force. McClellan lost about 1/7 of his force. Now they're retreating? What the heck? Whereas in this battle I've lost, I mean, if you're talking about effectives that I can throw into the field, I've lost 90% almost of my force. You know, goodness. Fast forwarding a bit, General Slocum's division, which previously had not been deployed, is coming in. This is a big deviation from history. McClellan didn't launch another big divisional size attack. This might even be 2 divisions coming in. 3 regiments trying to hold back 2 divisions? Oh, goodness. They just keep outflanking me. Their lines just envelop and outflank. Holy goodness, these are a ton of men. It's an entire division, possibly 2, which haven't been deployed or fought at all, that McClellan sends into the fray around 3 o'clock. Something totally unexpected. This did not happen in reality. This is part of that historical variant, and it kind of shows you if McClellan had gone forward and used some of those divisions that he had held in reserve, possibly what could have happened. I mean, yes, my casualties are higher than in real life, but the shape of my troops are not much better. I'm in some serious trouble here. Oh my goodness. Union troops all over the field, just driving me back. I've tried to fall back fighting, tried a fighting withdrawal. I've also tried to dispatch some troops from the southern part of the line back up to the northern part. But, don't think that's going to be to much avail. It's going to take him a good 15-20 minutes, and I don't think these 3 regiments are going to be combat effective for that long. Essentially what's happening here is every time the Union outflanks the line I have going here with these 3 regiments, I just tell them to retreat, trying to retreat back onto my artillery and use the canister fire to even the odds, but that's a fool's hope there. I mean, the artillery won't be a huge deciding factor until it gets into canister range. You're certainly not going to see artillery turn back what looks to be probably 2 full divisions. I know for sure Slocum's division is there. I haven't... Why are they retreating backward? Ugh. One issue with the mechanics of the game is sometimes troops do tend to retreat the wrong direction. Retreating into the enemy fire doesn't seem very logical. You don't normally see this. This is the only time I saw it in the whole battle, but certainly an inconvenient time when I'm trying to keep 3 pretty good-sized regiments effective. But yeah, as I was saying, each time they got outflanked, essentially, I just kept falling back with a regiment. That unit's outflanked. This other unit's... Oh, goodness, that one regiment is done for. Got 2 regiments and a big gap between them. And I've got some artillery. I've got infantry coming up from the south, but as I said, it's going to take them a while to get up here. It's also going to turn the initiative back over to Burnside's, who still has quite a few troops left. In the center, the Union's done for, but I don't have any troops to call from the center either. By this point, I've been pushed back. These are some troops. There's 2 regiments fighting now, which I'd called up from the southern part of the battlefield. My casualties are skyrocketing. The number of troops I have left is plummeting. The Union is just overrunning my entire force. This battle is definitely a defeat. The entire left wing of the army is vanished. The center is gone. It's not on the field anymore. Dead on the field, if you will. I can't remember who said it, but I believe there was a general at one point who said his division was dead on the field. Their artillery definitely helped to slow the Union advance at this point with infantry support, but there simply weren't enough. 2, 3 regiments that are good size, a couple of smaller regiments came up and promptly got routed before they could really get into position. The Union just kind of wrapped themselves around me, outflanked me. You see here they're coming in on the flank of that regiment. Can't really refuse my flank at all, so just being overwhelmed. This is a big what if. I mean, Lee's left wasn't quite as battered down as mine was in this game. He had more than 3 regiments left on the line. But if McClellan had sent in 2 full divisions like this, I can't imagine Lee would have been able to hold out. The left was fought out. So we're devolving away from what would have been interesting and a very accurate... I'm trying to get more troops, whatever I can scrounge from the field, up there at this point. But we're quickly devolving from a reenactment at this point to a hypothetical, you know, possible outcome. This cavalry regiment is pretty well fought out, but Hopefully we can get them up there. They'll be the quickest to get there. So those two regiments continue trading fire. It's over. Being routed from the field. This is more or less a rear guard action by this point. Rear guard action that is trying to stick to one strong point, clog up the Union advance long enough essentially to get us to nightfall so that what's left of the army can retreat. I mean, I have to imagine there's another, 20,000 Confederates roughly just kind of huddling in Sharpsburg, just in my own imagination, because I don't believe they'd run all the way back to Virginia when a regiment's driven from the field when the army's still fighting. So I just, in my head, I have this imagination of, some 20,000 fought-out troops sitting in Sharpsburg, not willing to put up any more of a fight, but just kind of hoping that nightfall comes so they can buy themselves some time to retreat. But for the game is concerned, they're all gone somewhere. Overrun. Artillery is fleeing. Cavalry didn't get there in time. I did bring a brigade up, but they never were really able to deploy. They just got routed from the field. I've only got one regiment left fighting. The other Union infantry are coming in right behind my artillery. That regiment's running now. It's over. The army is routed. And defeat. Not a major defeat, but a defeat. We'll see. 20,000 casualties to what, about 23,000 Union? Jeez. Looking through this is just depressing. This would have been a devastating defeat for the Union, or for the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. Effective troops left, very few. Looks like, what, less than just a couple thousand? Not even. The Union didn't do much better, though. They actually lost more men. They lost over 23,000 men. However, they had 75,000 to draw from. Some of those were routed from the field, though, so I don't know if it would be it wasn't a Pyrrhic victory for the Union. They won, but it also wasn't decisive either. Although, if the Confederate Army had lost this many men, it would have certainly not been effective for a while. I don't know if the shambles left in McClellan's army would have been effective either, though. Only about 20,000 effectives left. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has been quite an epic video here. I appreciate it. It's in honor of the 150th of Antietam. I don't have a whole lot more to say other than that it was one of the most intense and rewarding experiences in video game history for me, but obviously I was defeated at great cost to the Union, and if you like this, I hope you subscribe to the Wargamer channel and stay tuned for some more projects.